Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now on our 18th episode of 2024. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor. We really appreciate Wesco being our platinum sponsor. They're just a great company, and we appreciate all their support. And then last Thursday, NTIA approved the BEAD initial proposals for 3 more states. So we've been waiting. And so now Kansas, Nevada, and West Virginia have their initial proposals approved. So we got 4 states, including Louisiana. So the new ones are over $2 billion. Kansas had $450 million, Nevada a little less than $220 million, and West Virginia $1.2 billion. So we're off to the races, and hopefully we'll see that trend continue. On the sad note, yesterday was the final day of the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, which will impact 23 million low-income American families today. But congressional leaders are continuing to work to find a solution. And yesterday, a letter from 21 Republican members of Congress sent a letter to Speaker Johnson to request immediate action to be taken to provide short-term funding for ACP. So we'll see what happens on that. Tomorrow on Capitol Hill, May 2nd at 10 a.m. Eastern, the Senate Commerce Communications Subcommittee will hold a hearing, The Future of Broadband Affordability. This hearing will examine the state of broadband affordability programs, the impact of potential lapse or end of ACP, and ways to address the existing shortfalls in broadband affordability. I wish they had this hearing about 8 weeks ago. So the Fiber Broadband's next regional Fiber Connect workshop will be in Deer Valley, near Park City, Utah, on Tuesday, June 4th. If you haven't been there, it's absolutely amazing place, and the registration's looking great. Again, we're gonna, we had these sellout crowds at Richmond and Little Rock, and so please sign up today because you don't want to miss that. After Deer Valley, of course, we have our big Fiber Connect 2024, July 28th to 31st in Nashville. It's going to be absolutely the best ever. If you thought it was great last year in Orlando, we're taking it to the next level. And then we'll be in Des Moines for a regional event in September, Calgary, our first Canadian, in October, and then we'll round it out in Albuquerque, New Mexico in November. So I hope you guys will join us. Definitely see you in Nashville, and hopefully you can join us in the regionals. That brings us to today's Fiber for Breakfast session. Our guests are Jill Springer, the Senior Policy Advisor for Permitting Chief Environmental Review and Permitting Officer, Office of the Internet Connectivity and Growth, the world's longest title, Jill, at NTIA, and Kelly Stone, a GIS specialist at NTIA, who will be discussing maximizing the benefits of NTIA's new permitting tools. But before I formally introduce today's guests, I'd like to introduce David Norris from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and good morning to everyone who's joined us. We appreciate it. I'll go over just a couple of logistics here, but before I do, I want to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, please keep in mind all participants are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within the control panel on the side of your screen. We will have a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's session, so please do type your questions in. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. You can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. And at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do that. We really appreciate the input. And with that, I will pass things back over to Gary to once again introduce our panelists and get things started. Gary?
All right, thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, great session. We had Arnab Ghoshal, the Vice President of Connectivity and Innovation with Alabama Power, who discussed electric utilities working together to bridge the digital divide. Arnab shared that Alabama Power has over 1,600 miles of fiber in its service area and is partnering with the state's electric co-ops to provide 3,000 miles of middle mile fiber to 67 counties in the state as part of the Alabama Fiber Network. If you're a network operator and you're looking at going after that $1.4 billion of BEAD funding in Alabama, leasing middle mile fiber from Alabama Power and or the Alabama Fiber Network might help you be able to get to those project areas. Today on Fire for Breakfast, our guests are Jill Springer, Senior Policy Advisor for Permitting, Chief Environmental Review and Permitting Officer, Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth of NTIA, and Kelly Stone, the GIS Specialist at NTIA, will be discussing maximizing the benefits of NTIA's new permitting tools. Jill's is, I'm not going to go with the title again because I can't cover that title again. But Jill has been worked on communications infrastructure issues as an Associate Division Chief in FCC's Wireless Bureau, and as a Policy Advisor in the FCC's Office of Native Affairs and Policy. And Jill oversees NTIA's initiative to address barriers to timely broadband permitting and advises on environmental policy issues associated with the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. Joining Jill is Kelly Stone, a GIS Specialist at NTIA, who's going to be providing a demo of the GIS tools. So with all that, let's get things rolling. I'll hand it over to Jill and Kelly. But please type in your questions as we go. I know you guys will have a ton of questions, and we'll get to those after they did the demo.
Thank you, Gary. As you can imagine, we're the government, so there is an acronym for my title. It's SERPO, but people don't generally know what that means. So let's get started here. We've got a number of slides, and the most exciting part, I think, of the presentation today is this mapping tool demo. So next, please. Quickly going to talk about NTIA programs. It sounds like you get really great news associated with this webinar and the association in general, so won't take too long on that. Then I'll introduce some of the permitting tools, and we have a demo of the mapping tool today. So next slide, please. And next slide. So NTIA is currently administering 7 broadband grant programs totaling $49.5 billion. Next. And this funding is distributed in all 50 states and 6 territories. It ranges in amount from states like Texas that are receiving about $3.5 billion to smaller awarded territories like American Samoa, which is getting a little over $40 million. Next slide. So of the many challenges in supporting the concurrent deployments across the country, the Department of Commerce and NTIA recognize that permitting is really a significant challenge, potentially a significant challenge. These are linear projects, as you all well know, and they can be hundreds or thousands of miles. And for any given mile of infrastructure, even if you just are proposing to deploy aerially on existing poles, you might be crossing federal lands that require a federal land managing agency permit, tribal lands that could require both coordination with the tribe as well as the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Every permit has associated NEPA obligations, and of course there are NEPA obligations associated with federal funding. And then where projects might run through city or state-owned lands, there are other jurisdictions that have permitting actions as well as private ownership issues to negotiate. Next slide. So we have come up with this conceptual timeline to not just scare those of us who are working on these issues, but to recognize the fact that we have a number of programs that are right now ramping up concurrently with respect to when permitting responsibilities and applications are happening. And this, the most significant volume and peak period of permitting from our estimates is going to happen obviously associated with the BEAD program and start in fiscal year 25. Next slide. Continuing on. So with that in mind, I joined NTIA back in July after being with the FCC for about a decade, but I was previously at the Department of Commerce during the American Recovery Act broadband programs, BTOP, and got to work right away in organizing sort of the myriad elements and aspects of permitting into 3 different work streams. And so NTIA has been prioritizing making our own NEPA approvals and environmental requirements as streamlined and efficient as possible, in anticipation of these broadband permitting surges. We also have a fair amount of influence right now with all of the infrastructure priorities in the administration among our other federal agencies. And so we have been doing a whole lot to engage and prepare other federal agencies to receive and hopefully efficiently process broadband permitting applications, trying to coordinate where we can any duplicative environmental review obligations. And then finally, the third area of the work stream is the state, local, and private approvals. We recognize there are a lot of them. It's probably the area, though, that we have the least influence. And so we always are trying to identify actions and to coordinate things like we have an upcoming joint webinar with Federal Highway Administration about state DOT right-of-way deployments to ensure that both the state DOT officials and state broadband offices are aware of what the federal highway rules are for broadband deployment and what NTIA's programs look like and the types of infrastructure that are involved. So next slide, please. If you have deployed broadband infrastructure, you probably are aware that two of the most significant challenges in terms of environmental compliance can be threatened and endangered species, and then Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. So one of our first priorities was to ask the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to amend a program comment that they developed after the Recovery Act broadband programs. Their program comment was directed at streamlining review requirements for proposed broadband projects on federal lands. And it does a lot of things to increase the predictability, establishes the areas of potential effect, lowers the level of identification that's presumed required. And then it also has presumptive effect determinations for certain types of deployment. So NTIA asked the Advisory Council to amend that program comment to make it available to all agencies funding or permitting or otherwise supporting communications projects for all projects everywhere. And we did this in order to kind of equalize. We're always trying to control the variables because there are so many in permitting. And so now, as a result of the Advisory Council moving forward and amending the program comment, NTIA will be applying this program comment to kind of equalize the requirements for these Section 106 review processes in all the states and territories. And in addition to our initial ask to make this program comment available, the ACHP actually also incorporated the FCC's pole replacement provisions, which gives a lot more flexibility for presuming that those have no adverse effects. Next slide, please. So when we talk about maximizing the tools, I did want to flag for all of you today that one of the things that NTIA did, because this program comment is complicated, is to put together a flow chart, a guidance document that's available on the Broadband USA permitting page that helps you or your environmental consultants walk through the requirements of the program comment and apply it. This is going to be a new process and procedure for a lot of SHPOs. So we wanted to get clarity with the ACHP about what is required. So make sure as you begin Section 106 for your broadband projects that you go to the Broadband USA permitting website and take a look at this flow chart. Next slide, please. With respect to NEPA generally, we've done a lot in the past 7 to 8 months to streamline our environmental rules. So on April 2nd, we established 30 new categorical exclusions, and we adopted 6 from the First Responder Network Authority. When we took public comments on proposed categorical exclusions about a year ago, we heard from many, including many fiber associations, that the current categorical exclusions are helpful in deploying, and that the first net exclusions as well could be very helpful. So we listened and we moved forward in maximizing our impact in adopting these exclusions. This gives us a lot more flexibility to categorically exclude broadband projects and fiber projects from environmental assessment requirements. We're also adopting programmatic environmental impact statements that FirstNet did. And the benefit of adopting these PEISs is that when an environmental assessment is required, folks will be able to actually rely on that analysis and incorporate it by reference. This is going to save you a lot of time and effort in doing EAs when they are required. So we also, in a moment, are going to be talking about the mapping tools. We're in the process of developing a project tracking system and environmental screening tool for the BEAD project specifically. And then there is all kinds of technical assistance and support that we either have in development or available through the Broadband USA permitting page. Next slide, please. We've been doing a lot of interagency collaboration as well. My permitting team identified all of the federal land managing and permitting officials in field and district offices in each of the 7 BEAD regions. And we convened interagency regional broadband permitting meetings, calling together all of those folks to introduce the NTIA Internet for All grant programs and to talk about how we can best collaborate to make permit reviews and application procedures efficient as these projects come online. We'll also be, as a result of these conversations, establishing state-based permitting roundtables as a venue for resolving project-specific permitting issues at the earliest time possible and at the lowest level possible. Next slide, please. What we're here today, though, to talk about, largely wanted to make sure that you are aware of and had an opportunity to do is to demonstrate a permitting tool that we released in March. My colleague Kelly Stone is from our analytics team. She is going to show you how the permitting and environmental information application can help you identify permit requirements and screen for potentially significant environmental impacts and hopefully avoid them in your planning to deploy broadband infrastructure. Next slide, please. Well, I can turn it over to her now. That's fine. We do have another slide that has the web. There you go. Before I turn it over, I did want to just flag the 2 places that you can access this tool, which is publicly available. One is, again, another plug for the permitting page on Broadband USA. The access to the mapping tool is there, as well as an instructional video. And then on the National Broadband Availability Maps public site, there's a public GIS tab there, and you can get into the mapping tool there. So with that, now turning it over to Kelly.
Great. Thanks, Jill. Yeah, so those 2 websites that Jill mentioned, I have up here, so our broadbandusa.ntia.gov website. And from here, you can go to the Resources tab and click on Permitting. And then the application will be available there in a link. And there's also a video providing step-by-step instructions as well on accessing them. This always goes a little slow for some reason. But once you go to the permitting page, it'll come up. And then we also have, so here's the link to the mapping tool and a video. We also have our nbam.ntia.gov site. For our state and federal partners, they have logins that they can log into this site, but we do have publicly available data. So publicly available GIS data for our grant programs, but we also have the permitting and environmental application here as well. So 2 locations that you can access it. Once you actually open up the application, there's an initial welcome screen, and just for some background, the application was created to help with permitting planning and environmental review preparation efforts by providing access to multiple maps from publicly available sources, including federal review, permitting, and resource agencies. It is intended solely to assist users with preliminary identification of broadband deployments that may require permits or planning to avoid potentially significant impacts to environmental resources subject to NEPA and other statutory requirements. So what we have here on the welcome screen is some step-by-step instructions that link to the video of how to use the application, a graphic showing those steps, and disclaimer. So you can click Start. Let me move this out of the way. And the first thing that we're going to do is zoom to a location. So let's say that you're a provider and you want to do a project in Tucson, Arizona. So we're going to zoom to that location. And our first map comes up and is shown, which is our federal and tribal lands and property map. You can click on the legend to see what all of the colors on the map represent. You can also expand and turn on and off every layer. So if you only wanted to see DoD lands, you could turn on and off every layer with the eye. You can also click on the map to get more information. So in this case, this is the U.S. Forest Service lands. This is National Park Service. We also have some Army Corps projects and GSA facilities. So like Jill said, if you were having a broadband project in a certain area, you could overlap that and see exactly what federal agency you might have to coordinate with for permitting. I'm not going to go through every map due to time, but just quickly highlight some of them. We have state lands. We were able to find publicly available state lands from every state in Puerto Rico. We also have infrastructure and right-of-way layers. So this includes general roads, but also right-of-way layers for U.S. Forest Service, rail network lines, railroad crossings, and some right-of-way layers from states. And then we have some energy data sets, so electric transmission lines and electric retail service providers, so you can exactly see who is providing power in that area. Next is EPA programs. Most of this data sets come from the NEPA Assist tool, so they're all publicly available on EPA's website. We have a lot of data sets in here, and you can turn on and off all these layers to see them. All the layers marked with these double asterisks, that includes information that's relevant to determining if an extraordinary circumstance may warrant more detailed environmental review when a categorical exclusion may otherwise apply. So those are really key layers to take a look at. And then just as another example, we have our floodplains and wetlands. So here we have wetlands layers, which is going to come up in just a second, national flood hazard layers from FEMA, some coastal layers. And again, if you were developing a project, a broadband project, maybe along this highway, you can see that there's some wetlands crossing that. That could be a good opportunity to maybe do aerial instead of buried. And next we have critical habitat, obviously very critical for any NEPA reviews. So this gets to endangered and threatened species. You can click on the map to find out what species is endangered or threatened in that area. And here we can see Mexican spotted owl. You can click on this link to get more information about that. And again, same thing if you were crossing a specific area and wanted to know what endangered species might be there, this map will give you that opportunity. And like Jill mentioned, maybe instead of putting your project through there, putting it through a different location where we're not impacting critical habitat. And then our last map is historical places. This is the National Register of Historic Places. Again, you can click on any of these maps to get more information. We're also trying to pull in state historic preservation data. I was able to pull that in from North Carolina, but if there's others, we're happy to do that. And then finally, our data sources tab. We have a lot of data in here. It's all publicly available. And of course, the site is publicly available to anyone as well to use. And so I've included links to all the GIS data sources of where I obtained this data so you can easily ingest it into your own system as well. So please be sure to take a look at this as well. But hopefully this tool will help with your permitting and environmental planning efforts. And with that, I will turn it back to Jill and Gary.
Well, there's a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So the first question that came in is the information, Kelly, you're showing, is that real time?
Yes, so all of these data sources are pulled in, most of them, I'd say 90% of them are pulled in live from those federal agency partners or state agencies, yes.
Okay, and then if your company's already has a GIS as a mapping platform, is there a way to pull this tool into their GIS maps so they can see this data on top of their own network assets?
They can't necessarily pull all of this entire application in, but they can use the data sources tab to pull that in. We also have maps associated with each one of these that they could potentially pull in there as well.
All right, well, great. And I mean, I know this seems super straightforward, but if you were to struggle, just because there's a little bit of complexity, what's the best way to, can someone reach out to you, or how do people that are trying to work with this map and trying to integrate it into their network assets and everything?
Yeah, so I would definitely review the video to understand how to use the tool. But also, if you want more detailed assistance, we do have an email on there, nbam@ntia.gov, on the initial welcome screen that you can always email us, and we're happy to do that.
And then another question is, how detailed is the INS infrastructure?
What was the acronym?
It just says INS. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe Michael can give us some more detail on that. All right. Also, there's a bunch of questions about FAST 41. Do you have any view on how relevant FAST 41 process is to these broadband projects, and how many states and locals and tribes have been able to leverage FAST 41?
Sure. So my title, SERPO, actually agencies are required to have SERPOs as part of the FAST Act. So it's an associated question. We currently have 2 projects that are on the dashboard. They're both tribal broadband connectivity program projects. And I will tell you that the whole dashboarding system and FAST 41 system is really set up to support projects over $200 million and very, very complex projects. And while it is true that there are a lot of permitting requirements associated with broadband, I will just be frank, it is a very, very intensive process, both on the project proponent side and on the NTIA side in coordination. So one of the things I didn't mention that we're really excited about is we just received funding from the Permitting Council. And what we propose to do for BEAD is to develop, as I mentioned quickly, an environmental screening and permitting tracking tool. What we are going to be doing is taking that FAST 41 permitting dashboard and incorporating it into a tool for us to use to help eligible entities kind of do a lot of the process pieces, because there are some really, really great things about the FAST 41 system, but there are things to be aware of. So for example, with the Mobile Now Act 270-day requirement for permitting, that 270 days doesn't really start until an application is considered complete. And there can be a lot of back and forth before that happens. So, I think we are still using the projects we have now on the dashboard to try to get to the sweet spot. But what we've proposed is to, try to develop a more scalable option that we can apply to BEAD and the other programs here.
There's also a comment that Jill, if you could comment on what it means for the state broadband offices to become joint lead agencies, and how that will impact the sub-grantee selection process and the expectations the applicants and the broadband offices should have about that new relationship.
Yeah, so I can't answer how any given state is going to view it with respect to their process, but I can tell you a little bit more about it. So again, knowing that this is not only a huge program, BEAD, but it's unlike any grant program that NTIA has, in the sense that we aren't making those grants directly to the subrecipients like we would in TBCP or in Middle Mile. So, we looked very closely at other federal models where federal entities are funding states to do things. So Federal Highway is a really good example. Department of Housing and Urban Development is another one. And what those agencies have done to try to eliminate all the duplicative processes is to give the state an enhanced role in the NEPA process. So most of our projects are going to qualify for categorical exclusions, and we are expecting the states and territories to bring on some capacity, and sometimes that can be achieved by co-oping. For example, a lot of these projects are going to be in state DOT rights of way. State DOTs generally have very well built out NEPA teams. The state can decide perhaps that a state NEPA person could be in charge, a state DOT NEPA person could be detailed or something to the state broadband office. And effectively, by doing the screenings at those levels, and in that case, also merging the duplicative DOT and broadband requirements, we're trying to give the states the ability to make these projects move as quickly as possible. So all of the preparation of the initial NEPA document would go through the state then, and it would come to us for a very expedited review. We think that this is going to be a whole lot more efficient, and we think that there are a lot of ways that states can look to resource this. We're just beginning the process of talking about that now.
Well, Jill, we did get a lot of comments on how much everybody appreciates NTIA and all the hard work you guys have been doing. It's just in a very short time, you've really come on. So thank you guys for that. And just want to thank Jill and Kelly for sharing the tool. I know that it's very quick look. So hopefully people have some time to spend some time with that and learn a little bit more how to leverage your tool. So thank you for that. Also excited next week on Five for Breakfast, we're going to have my good friend Joanne Hovis, the president of CTC Technology and Energy, who's going to share with us the inside scoop on BEAT timelines and the state's grant strategies to get this, the statutory goal of 100% coverage. So Joanne is the person that knows all that, and can't wait to hear from her. Thanks everyone. Thanks Jill and Kelly. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone.